This problem, which they invented in order to safeguard their purity, has made of them criminals and monsters, and it is destroying. They done nothing for which to be hated. It spoke of reconciliation, of all things now becoming possible. I knew a blonde girl in the village a long time ago. We never walked out of the house together. She was far safer walking the streets alone than when walking with me. A brutal and humiliating fact. But Americans have yet to realize what a sinister fact this is and what it says about them. Someone once said to me that the people in general cannot bear very much reality. They prefer fantasy to a truthful recreation of their experience. The people have quite enough reality to bear by simply getting through their lives, raising their children, dealing with the eternal conundrums of birth, taxes, and death.
I remember, for example, when the ex-Attorney General, Mr. Robert Kennedy, said that it was conceivable that in 40 years in America we might have a Negro president. And that sounded like a very emancipated statement, I suppose, to white people. They were not in Harlem when this statement was first heard, and did not hear, and possibly will never hear, the laughter and the bitterness and the scorn with which the statement was greeted. From the point of view of the man in the Harlem barbershop, Bobby Kennedy only got here yesterday. And now he's already on his way to the presidency. We've been here for 400 years, and now he tells us that maybe in 40 years, if you're good, we may let you become president. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have indeed, and for so long, so many generations, cheap labor. It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them. And until that moment, until the moment comes when we, the Americans, we, the American people, are able to accept the fact that I have to accept, for example, that my ancestors are both white and black, that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, and that I am not a ward of America. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it.
The now that is being spoken about is the fact that in 100 years, finally, through whatever the causes have been in history, and most of them have been because of oppression, the Negro people have strongly and fully taken the bit in their teeth. They're asking absolutely no quarter from anyone. But I do say that the bulk of the interpretation of whether this thing is going to end successfully and joyously or is going to end disastrously lays very heavily with the white community. It lays very heavily with the profiteers. It lays very heavily with the vested interests. It lays very heavily with a great middle stream in this country of people who have refused to commit themselves or even have the slightest knowledge that these things have been going on.
I am speaking as a member of a certain democracy in a very complex country, which insists on being very narrow-minded. Simplicity is taken to be a great American virtue, along with sincerity. One of the results of this is that immaturity is taken to be a virtue too. So that someone like that, let's say John Wayne, who spent most of his time on screen admonishing Indians, was in no necessity to grow up.
There is nothing in the evidence offered by the book of the American Republic which allows me really to argue with the cat who says to me, they needed us to pick the cotton, and now they don't need us anymore. And now they don't need us, they're going to kill us all off, just like they did the Indians. And I can't say it's a Christian nation. Your brothers will never do that to you because the record is too long and too bloody. That's all we have done. All your buried corpses now begin to speak.
Violence is a part of America's culture. It is as American as cherry pie.
If we were white, if we were Irish, if we were Jewish, if we were Poles, if we had, in fact, in your mind, a frame of reference, our heroes would be your heroes too. Nat Turner would be a hero for you instead of a threat. Malcolm X might still be alive. Or any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, word for word, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him.
What I'm trying to say to this country, to us, is that we must know this. A great many people do not live this way and cannot imagine it, and do not know that when we talk about democracy, this is what we mean. The industry is compelled, given the way it is built, to present to the American people a self-perpetuating fantasy of American life. Their concept of entertainment is difficult to distinguish from the use of narcotics. To watch the TV screen for any length of time is to learn some really frightening things about the American sense of reality. We are cruelly trapped between what we would like to be and what we actually are. And we cannot possibly become what we would like to be until we're willing to ask ourselves just why the lives we lead on this continent are mainly so empty, so tame, and so ugly. Were photographs of 15-year-old Dorothy Counts being reviled and spat upon by the mob as she was making her way to school in Charlotte, North Carolina. There was unutterable pride, tension, and anguish in that girl's face as she approached the halls of learning with history jeering at her back. It made me furious. It filled me with both hatred and pity, and it made me ashamed. Some one of us should have been there with her. I miss the way the dark face closes, the way dark eyes watch, and the way when a dark face opens, a light seems to go everywhere. Now, though I was a stranger, I was home.
Nobody says you have, Tom, but they might.
The film's icy brutality both scared me and strengthened me. I despised and feared those heroes. They thought vengeance was theirs to take. And yes, I understood that. My countrymen were my enemy. I suspect that all these stories are designed to reassure us that no crime was committed. We made a legend out of a massacre.
Leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life, and your identity has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
They don't want to believe, still less to act on the belief that what is happening in Birmingham is happening all over the country. They don't want to realize that there is not one step morally or actually between Birmingham and Los Angeles. Malcolm and Martin. I watched two men coming from unimaginably different backgrounds, whose positions originally were poles apart, driven closer and closer together. By the time each died, their positions had become virtually the same position. It can be said indeed that Martin picked up Malcolm's burden, articulated the vision which Malcolm had begun to see and for which he paid with his life, and that Malcolm was one of the people Martin saw on the mountaintop.
I'm terrified at the moral apathy, the death of the heart, which is happening in my country. These people have deluded themselves for so long that they really don't think I'm human. I base this on their conduct, not on what they say. And this means that they have become, in themselves, moral monsters. That's what segregation means. You don't know what's happening on the other side of the wall because you don't want to know.
People forget how young everybody was. Bobby Kennedy was 38. We wanted him to tell his brother, the president, to personally escort to school on that day or the day after a small black girl already scheduled to enter Deep South School. That way, we said, it will be clear that whoever spits on that child will be spitting on the nation. In America, I was free only in battle, never free to rest. And he who finds no way to rest cannot long survive the battle. And the young white revolutionary remains in general far more romantic than a black one. White people have managed to get through entire lifetimes in this euphoric state. But black people have not been so lucky. A black man who sees the world the way John Wayne, for example, sees it, would not be an eccentric patriot, but a raving maniac.
The Negro has never been as docile as white Americans wanted to believe. That was a myth. We were not singing and dancing down the levee. We were trying to keep alive. We were trying to survive a very brutal system. The Negro has never been happy in this place. The corpses of your brothers and your sisters pile up around you, and not for anything they have done. They were too young to have done anything. But what one does realize is that when you try to stand up and look the world in the face like you had a right to be here, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world. Forget the Negro problem. Don't write any voting acts. We had that, it's called the 15th Amendment. During the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, what you have to look at is what is happening in this country. And what is really happening is that brother has murdered brother knowing it was his brother. It is not a racial problem. It's a problem whether or not you're willing to look at your life and be responsible for it and then begin to change it. That great Western house I come from is one house, and I am one of the children of that house. Simply, I'm the most despised child of that house. And it is because the American people are unable to face the fact that, in fact, I am flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone.
This problem, which they invented in order to safeguard their purity, has made of them criminals and monsters, and it is destroying them.